let you know more about that video.
I think part of the purpose of that marriage, what do they call it, marriage, whatever it's called, is I think to hurt liberal, progressive, Democratic candidates. You know, the right wing can use as a wedge to get their people out who are really incensed over those issues.
Which really doesn't seem to be working too well this year, because there's so many other big issues that I think even the most hardened evangelicals have decided that this whole gay marriage thing, we can deal with that later.
Yeah.
Well, they're out in California picketing, aren't they?
Well, they don't realize that James Dobson is not invited to the CFR meetings, and he's not being supported by the Bilderbergers, and you know, this is just an outside thing that they like for a little fringe. And so I'm sure that they don't invite him to give prayer at the CFR meetings.
You know, one of the things that's interesting that's coming up, it's the 21st through the 24th, I think, is the big Kufi conference in Washington, D.C. Kufi is Christians United for Israel, and it's John Hagee's organization. And John Hagee is on record in his book as saying that it's necessary for the United States and Israel to go to war with Iran so that we can consolidate Israel and bring about the second coming of Christ.
Right.
Wow.
So, and that's the whole purpose of Kufi. He formed Kufi to specifically to promote a war with Iran after he wrote this book. And at the conference, for the second year in a row, he's got Joe Lieberman speaking at the conference. He's got, what's his name? Is probably the biggest evangelical Christian right now in the state assembly, state house. Hanson is his name. His name escapes me at the moment.
And where?
In the Florida State House, yeah. Is one of the big speakers there. And of course, the usual band of suspects. He's got Daniel Pipes, John Hagee, and all of them. But this is something that it's a good idea to pay attention to, because they still have really close connections with not only with AIPAC, but also with the neocons in the administration. And they're pushing really hard. And right now, what seems to be emerging as the consensus is that the U.S. isn't going to hit Iran. It looks like Israel may very well be the one to pull it off. But in terms of effect and in terms of how that's going to play in the eyes of the rest of the world, particularly in the Middle East, it's going to be understood as a joint U.S.-Israeli operation. And of all the terrible things that have happened in the last 8 years, we haven't passed the point of no return, where there's nothing we can't fix in a reasonable amount of time. But if we go to war with Iran, that's the point of no return. That's global depression at a minimum. And they're not going to get their apocalypse, you know, but what they are going to get is they're going to get an end to any sort of serious U.S. power in the world. We may see the end of no doubt we'll see the end of the Iranian regime too, but it's going to be the same thing as what we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, that government may fall, but that doesn't mean that we're going to get anything that will take its place that's going to be any better. So, you know, in terms of the peace fair and the message we're coming out, I know the anti-war message can be a downer when you're trying to get everybody to come in and have a good time, but I think that is the single most pressing issue of anything that we face right now. We have to get everybody to understand that this idea of attacking Iran it's the worst idea humanly possible. We need to make sure that everybody understands that anybody who does that needs to be held accountable. Israel or the United States would have no legal basis for attacking Iran at this point, and so
doesn't stop us.
Yeah, but you know, if we could convince more people in Washington that they would be held accountable for that, you know, kind of like what Congressman Kucinich is doing, trying to get the impeachment hearings going.
Well, why do they say we haven't attacked Iran yet when Cheney's been running the secret operations there now?
That's right. Special forces is operating, and we're actually backing terrorist organizations in Iran. The MEC is a good example. It's a Kurdish group that's actually on the terrorist watch list. That for quite a while, if we're not still doing it, we were funneling them money. They do car bombings.
We've always done that.
The Baluchi Revolution Fund, which a number of the number twos that we've captured from Khaled Mohammed is actually from the Baluchistan resistance movement. It's an extremist Sunni Al-Qaeda type organization that we've been funding because they are operating against the Iranian government.
How much
Is
of
there,
it? I'm sorry.
is there one good website to get a lot of that information, or are you getting it from a variety?
I've been getting it from a broad range. I tell you, there's a couple of organizations that I found that have been really good resources. I should say individuals. Ray McGovern writes quite a bit. Ray McGovern is a former CIA caseworker, and in the run-up to the Iraq War, he was one of the people who founded an organization called Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And the purpose was it was all people from the intelligence community that were speaking out against the Iraq War, and now they're speaking out against the Iran War, the idea of a war with Iran as well. Another one, of course, is any article that's come out from Seymour Hersh in the New Yorker. He's been an excellent source of information. Also, Scott Ritter has been putting out quite a lot of good information. And there's one website, the name of which escapes me at the moment. It's Tom Englehart's website, you know what I'm talking about. Tom Englehart.
Mohart?
What's that? Yeah, I can't think of the name of his website, but he has guest speakers, and Scott Ritter and the names I just mentioned are some of the people that show up there. But he's a good clearinghouse for information about the war. I mean, all of this information is out there, and I mean, it's the same thing with the run-up to the Iraq War. This information is out there now, and it's being circulated around. It's just not being picked up by the mainstream media as much as it should be. And particularly, I mean, the rhetoric that we hear on both sides, from the Democrats and the Republicans against Iran right now, is just really alarming, because they're both saying, you know, that Iran is this huge threat, when I'm not convinced. You know, even worst case scenario, if Iran does get a nuclear weapon, that doesn't mean that they want it because they want to use it. That means they want it because they want it as a deterrence. North Korea has a nuke. Worst dictatorship in the world right now, we negotiate with them. Iraq, no nukes, gets invaded. Iran, no nukes, has the threat of invasion. So I think, you know, if they are actually working on a nuclear weapons program, I think that may be their main thing, is that they want to be taken seriously as a real country, because we negotiate with people no matter how odious they are, if they can defend themselves with nukes. But if they can't defend themselves, they're an open target for regime change.
If there's not one shred of evidence that their intent, or that they're doing, or their intent to develop a nuclear weapons program, everything is speculation.
Exactly.
Israel knows that's because their method of intelligence is totally, in the last 10 years, they used to go on fact-based intelligence, and now Israel, the nation of Israel, their policies are determined by faith-based intelligence. We believe, we think, indications, maybe. That's how Israel determines its policy. It's scary.
And Israel has the same problem that we have in the U.S. Israel right now, the Israeli government is being run by the equivalent of the neocons that we have in this country. The people from the Likud party and also the ones that have gone over to Kadima. They're basically that's their version of the neocons. And you look at the press that comes out of Israel. You look at the polls that they do in Israel. The majority of Israelis are willing to trade land for peace. The majority of Israelis, want to talk with a lot of these people out there. They want to talk with Syria. They want to talk with Hezbollah, and so they're having the same problem. And unfortunately, you have this sort of ugly coalition of extremists in the U.S. and Israel. You know, AIPAC is a perfect example. AIPAC does not represent the views of the majority of Jewish people in this country. In fact, I just saw a poll, I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think it was something like 18% of the Jewish people that were polled had views that were consistent with AIPAC. So, but again, it's this extreme element that's calling the shots.
They control
What is AIPAC?
elections.
What is AIPAC?
The American Israeli lobby.
Yeah.
Right, that's what they have tons and tons
And
of
Nancy Pelosi is in with those.
Mhm.
Oh, they can destroy a credible politician, and they can elect a buffoon by the smear, the money, That's what AIPAC does. It's scary.
I think that small minority who's in power in Israel are the Zionists, right? People who are
Yeah, basically. Yeah, they are there's 400,000 settlers out of 6 million people in Israel, and that 400,000, everybody is afraid to alienate those settlers, and they have a lot of influence on the Israeli right wing in politics.
And the U.S. gives tons of aid money to Israel.
Yeah. The strategy right now of the Israeli government, particularly with the occupied territories, is they've decided that basically they can wall off the territory that they want, and that they can keep the Palestinians divided against themselves for another 10, 20 years until eventually everyone just recognizes by default that what they've taken is Israel proper. And that's why Hamas, no question about it, Hamas uses terrorist tactics. I understand. What they do is wrong, but so is the way that the Israeli government is attacking the Palestinians for the sake of rooting out Hamas. And what we have to do as a country is we've got to say, look, we are against all of this violence. We're against all of the attacks against civilians. It doesn't matter if it's an organization, if it's individuals, or if it's a country. All of it's got to stop. You can't say that one group has a right to defend itself and another group doesn't. If you're going to talk about human rights, it has to be a consistent policy.
I think the way to get the average citizen connected with that issue, because a lot of people don't have a lot of knowledge about it, is that our tax dollars are going to support what Israel is doing, and most people don't understand that. And it's I don't know. I think if we can get that awareness out there that our money is going to fund that injustice that's going on.
Something I don't know if a big movement here is a lot of people have been trying to boycott Caterpillar because Caterpillar sells the bulldozers that the Israelis have been using to bulldoze Palestinian houses, and so they're basically these big armored bulldozers. Rachel Corrie was killed by one of those,
right.
And so people have been trying to boycott Caterpillar. But what happened a couple weeks ago in Israel is a Palestinian Israeli went nuts, got into a bulldozer, and killed like 7 Israelis. And one of the things I thought was interesting is I was looking at a Jewish news site, and one of the headlines on there was Caterpillar is killing Israelis now too. So,
wow.
Yeah, I'm well aware that all of the Israelis don't support the Zionist viewpoint.
they're afraid.
And how do you identify a terrorist organization? If we kill 600,000 people in a country we decided to depose their government, are we terrorists? I don't know. Is Israel terrorists when they go into the West Bank and they blow up a bunch of places and kill a bunch of people?
And they violate more.
Then how did they get in place there? What is terrorism? Who's a terrorist organization in the world?
The other nations in the Middle East, I'm sure, would not view an Israeli attack on Iran favorably, but they don't have the guts to put together a mutual pact that any attack on Iran by Israel we all go in against Israel. They'd be afraid. They'd get the nukes too.
Well, see what the neocons are playing. They're playing the strong Sunni governments like Saudi Arabia and some of the Gulf states against Iran. Basically, what they're doing is they're using the situation that we created in Iraq, this open civil war between Sunnis and Shiites, and they're convincing the people in the Gulf that you have to join us against Iran, or else there's going to be a Shiite uprising in all of your countries, particularly countries like Saudi Arabia that have a large Shiite minority. And it's not that we have to do much to stoke those tensions to begin with, because those are there already, but that's what they're playing against. So what you would likely see is you would likely see the Gulf states would mostly stay silent. But the flip side to that is if we could get the Palestinians and Israel to the table and to get a real agreement, the entire Arab League, including Iran, has agreed to recognize Israel in full diplomatic relations. So, I mean, there's reasonable alternatives out there. Look at France yesterday just brokered for the first time since 1940 Lebanon and Syria are going to have embassies in each other's countries. You know, so I mean, we can make progress there. We just have to talk with people.
If we took all the aid that's given to Israel, we added the aid that's given to the Palestinians, and then we put it together in one sum, and we split it down the middle, and we give half to each one. I wonder if that would help.
That would help tremendously. If the Israelis, or if the Palestinians weren't, especially in Gaza, I mean, Gaza right now is a big prison camp. You know, I mean, what else do you call a place that you put people where you decide who goes in and who goes out, you lock the doors, you lock up the coast, you lock up the airspace? I mean, if we did that in the U.S., people would call that a penal colony, you know, and that's...
They don't have any rights.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think to get the average person in the U.S. to understand that, would you rather have all this money going, all your tax dollars going to fund this prison, or giving Israel more nukes or military power, because that's why that's where all that money's going, or would you rather have it spent on education and healthcare?
The disturbing thing is that some other people would say, yeah, we'd like to give a lot of it in military aid. There's a lot of people who are all about increasing prison camps for Arabs and supporting the Jewish state no matter the cost.
People are afraid. Yeah, people are afraid. This is the thing. There's definitely, we were just talking about the Kufi conference that's coming up in Washington, which is exactly what that group is.
Yeah.
But I think the majority of people in this country don't necessarily hold that position, but they're afraid because what they're getting presented is Israel is our guy, Israel is this super democracy versus terrorists who would kill you first chance they can get. I mean, they're selling Iran as this is the term they're actually using, the suicide nation. That Iran is run by such religious fanatics that as soon as they get a nuke, they would commit national suicide and attack attack Israel. And this is nonsense. I'm not saying the Iranian government is a bunch of swell guys, but the Iranian government is driven by the same pragmatic concern for self-preservation that every other government in the world is.
I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that among our allies in the Middle East, Iran is more democratic. Their government, their society is more democratic than our friends.
Yeah, and the government, first of all, I mean, we know, I know everyone at this table knows, you know, Iran actually was a democracy that the CIA deposed in 1953, and this is where the stem of, this is the root of all of that hatred. But culturally, Iran is probably the country that is most likely to move in a truly democratic Western fashion than any other country in the Middle East. And even the government that they have now, we tend to forget that even the people, Ahmadinejad was elected to office. You know, and he is actually, and this is an important thing, I'm not a big fan of Ahmadinejad myself, but he's coming up for re-election in 2009. And if we play our cards right, and we ratchet down the threat level, he's got nothing. He's got a failed economy, and he's got a world that hates his country, and everybody in Iran would see that if they didn't feel like they were under a common threat. You know, and we could get rid of Ahmadinejad, and we could placate the people here who have just chosen to vilify him. I mean, we could, actually, I should say, we could let the Iranian people get rid of Ahmadinejad. We would have a fresh government there, and we'd have a fresh government here. And I think this is one of the things that the neocons are afraid of. Among the many reasons why they're pushing for an attack before the end of the year is because not only do they feel that if there's a change of leadership in Washington, militarily we won't have another chance, but politically there might be a real reconciliation, and the extremists in the Israeli government and the extremists in this government don't want to see that happen.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Ahmadinejad just a more or less figurehead president?
The president is primarily, the president of Iran is primarily concerned with domestic issues. In terms of foreign policy, he has zero say in what Iranian foreign policy is. In that respect, he is a figurehead. Everything is, the mullahs basically still control everything. That the Ayatollah controls foreign policy. So,
Consider two weapons. One is a tank. The other is a woman with explosives strapped around the body. They're fighting each other in a war. not declared war. Who's a terrorist? I mean, I'd be hated for saying this publicly, but I've looked at this for years, and it's exactly what the argument is.
Scott Ritter said something. I was an intelligence analyst in the Army for 5 years, and Scott Ritter said something that I thought summed it up perfectly. He said, "You want to talk about a weapon of mass destruction? Show me a platoon of Marines, in the middle of an urban area that gets afraid, that gets scared and starts firing. I mean, the amount of firepower that even a squad can put out is a tremendous amount of firepower. And this is one of the reasons that we had so many problems in Iraq, because they think they're under threat, or they come under threat and they start firing indiscriminately in all directions in the middle of a major urban area and cause a lot of casualties. If that's not a weapon of mass destruction, I don't know what is. And this isn't necessarily the Marines' fault. This is the fault of the leadership that put them in that situation in the first place. This is the lack of a clear chain of command and clear policies on how to behave. So much of what they're crediting with success for the surge now is the fact that the U.S. military, particularly the Army, has adapted more to urban policing type policies instead of infantry type policies and how they behave.
They're supposed to police the country of people where they don't even speak the language, and
right.
And they're not trained to be police officers. They're trained in combat.
Well, it's interesting. After the invasion, a couple weeks after everything had settled, the British in Basra were out with no armor, with soft caps, with their rifles slung on their back, walking around the neighborhoods, talking to people. And that's the way that you. Again, they shouldn't have been there in the first place, but if you are going to have to commit to that type of operation, that's what you want to do. You have to look at it more as a police type operation than a military type of operation. Belatedly, our military is starting to understand that, but still we don't have credible policy coming out of Washington that's allowing them to utilize that in the way it's ultimately going to be effective. It's 40. We can stay for another 4 years or another 4 years, but ultimately, if we stay in Iraq another 40 years, it's not going to look like Germany or Japan. It's going to look like Gaza. So
they can blow up a city block for $1,000 and we'll spend a couple million trying to track down people that did it. I mean, you can't win a war like that.
there is never in modern history has an invading power ever defeated a determined insurgent movement. Never. It's never happened.
Notice anything about the long-term security implications of turning our army from a frontline combat force into a police force?
Well, you know, this is the thing. I think right now, if you look at what's going on in the 21st century, even with countries like Russia and China, you look at the amount of resources that they're actually allocating to the military, and you look at what we're allocating to our military. It seems that there are three. Take it.
Thanks.
It seems that there are three factions in the world right now that think that they can bomb their enemies into submission. That's Al-Qaeda, Israel, and the United States. Everybody else has pretty much resolved that the way to power is through economics and through negotiation, open markets, and what have you. But we seem to be among the last holdouts. And so what you have is you have this little small extreme group in the Islamic community, and you have this little small extremist group that's determining policy in this country, and again also in Israel, and they're feeding off of each other. And modern society, you know, it's not like it was even, you know, after World War II. I mean, modern society is the infrastructure involved is so complex. The level of education that you need, the level of technology that you need, the actual physical infrastructure itself is a delicate thing. I mean, drive around Fort Myers and look at power plant, look at power lines, look at the phone relays, and think, look at when we have a hurricane, look at how much damage that does. Can you imagine that going on for a couple of years straight? And that's the situation they're in. And when that happens, the education level drops, the educated people leave, the infrastructure is destroyed, and it doesn't take 5 years to rebuild. When you have 5 years of damage, that takes a generation to rebuild. And so the idea that we need this big, huge conventional army to protect us, something out of the 20th century. It doesn't belong to this age. Now, I still, I'm sure some of the people at this table will disagree with me, but I think having a nuclear arsenal as a deterrent, I think, is effective. I think the threat of mutually assured destruction is still something that keeps people in line. I think that we do need to have some sort of conventional military. I mean, it doesn't mean we have to use it, but I think that we do have to have at least a decent reserve of conventional military forces. But by and large, the most effective use of the military in the past 20 years has been in nation building and policekeeping operations, and that's what our military should be geared for.
I've just been seeing Vincent Bugliosi making appearances on TV. He's got a new book out about bringing Bush to trial for murder. Is airtight, the evidence, the legality of it, and just hoping that people see it and start paying attention. Maybe, he says, once Bush leaves office, there's no way he can prevent, court proceedings.
I think what's going to happen is, unfortunately, it's going to be really difficult to bring anybody in this administration to account if they leave office and there's no major escalation in the war. However, if we do attack Iran, the fallout from that is going to be so bad that everybody is going to be demanding heads. Everyone is going to want to see somebody. And I'll tell you, the guy who needs to be the most afraid is Donald Rumsfeld.
Right.
Because he's the scapegoat that I guarantee you everybody on the right is going to say, this guy is responsible for everything. So
I think to attack Iran would be insane. If the Israelis are insane enough, I don't know. Cheney is, but I don't think we're going to do it.
there's so much opposition right now in the military and in the intelligence community that I think, never say never, but compared to the run-up to Iran, I think everybody has put their foot down, even in the State Department as well. So many people at the mid-level and the top levels of the bureaucracy and the military have said, we're not going to stand for this, and I think it's really difficult for the U.S. to do anything. Now the Israelis, on the other hand, there's a lot of opposition in Israel as well, but Israel is still smarting from their loss in Lebanon. So, I think that there may be enough people in Israel that they may be foolish enough to try and pull something like this off. I hope that's not the case, because I've been to Israel and I've met a lot of incredibly sensitive people there, and all levels. And I think that I would like to think that they're smart. This is what we got to do. We've got to get out and make sure that this is a big issue for us. Even though it's not a big issue in the election right now, nobody wants to talk about it when the mainstream candidates. We need to make sure that we're talking about it. Because I would rather get out there and talk about how important it is to prevent a war with Iran and have nothing happen at the end of the year and look foolish and not win an election than have a war with Iran and win an election.
It's now we're gonna have the potluck from 2 to 4. It's now a little past 4, and I really need to get going. I'm sorry, guys. You're more than welcome to switch trade email addresses and keep in contact. And John, I hope to see you in the future. This is Jared over here. He's also with the Progressive Aliance, and he's also interested in maybe bringing some more political issues to campus before the election. So maybe you guys could talk a little.
I don't have a card.
Okay. Do you want to keep this one? All right. And I'll be at the EPAC meeting tomorrow.
Okay, great. You know where it is?
No, I don't. Where is it?
Do you know where Alliance for the Arts is on McGregor Boulevard?
No, is that where the art show is going to be?
Here's what I'm going to do. You're in 75.
I can't find it.
Okay, I guess the best bet would be to get on Colonial.
Oh, maybe I'll go with you.
Okay, let's see how I can move over here. Okay.
Got like
This is going to be what you don't want. So there's a lady on the right side. That'll take you aside the
Actually, there's a lot of too much backlight.
Oh, really?
And it's like a lot of points. Like there's a lot of places in this room.
actually we're not
We've got windows on